You know, there was a song that we used to sing in testimony service that says, I'm a soldier in the army of the Lord. And the thing I like about being a soldier in the army of the Lord is that I know that I win. There may be little battles, there may be little skirmishes that happen along my journey, but at the end of the day, I know that I will have the final victory through Jesus, and that is all that matters. Once again, I am so glad to present the Sanctuary Sunday School. I am back in the studio, yes. I am not using the green screen. This is just the studio wall right now because I was in here doing some other work, and I decided, you know what, I'm in the studio. I'm just going to sit down at the desk here and deliver the message, the Sunday school lesson from the studio just because I can, and it's open. Thank the Lord for that. So this week's subject is Samson's final victory. This is such a sad, tragic, beautiful, heartwarming, all together the story of Samson. And this is the end of the story. We started talking about it last week, and we talked about the battle between Samson and the Philistines and all of the things that they did and how they were going back and forth. And as we know, they remained an enemy of the Israelites all the way down through David. They remained an enemy. But here we see that God gave Samson the victory in this lesson. And again, you know, it was Samson, he was there, and he fell in love with a beautiful woman named Delilah, who was a Philistine woman. And just right there, I know there's a lot of stories about Delilah, and as people of God, we have to be so careful who we interact with, especially for Samson. He was big and he was strong and he was gifted, and sometimes your gift will make room for you, that it does, but sometimes it will attract people to you who are not good for you, and you've got to be able to withstand those people. And but we see that Samson was not able to withstand Delilah, and he stayed with her, and she was actually a spy for the lords of the Philistines, and her goal was to find out the secret to Samson's strength. And as we talked about last week, Samson had taken a Nazarite vow, and there were certain things that he could not do in order to maintain that strength because that God gave him. And so Delilah was determined to find out the source of Samson's strength. And for a little while, Samson was able to hold out and not tell her. And so, you know, he had 7 braids, and the first thing he told her was that he told her all kind of stuff. He said, if you tie fresh ropes or if you weave my braids together, do all of this stuff, it would make me weak. And every time she would do what he said, she'd call for the Lord of the Philistines to bind him, and then he would just shake it loose. And it became fun to him. And I guess, you know, I'm looking at this, and it's easy for me to look at this and say, well, you saw the first couple of times, right? When you told her what she thought was the source of your strength, she did that to make you weak. And I looked at that, and that's not actually in this lesson, but it does apply. We've got to be wise. Once, I think it was Maya Angelou who made the statement, once somebody shows you who they are, believe them. And so, you know, sometimes it could be ego, it could be love, or whatever it is, and we can't really see people for what they are, but we want to be able to see when somebody was sent by the enemy to bring us down and take us down. And that's exactly who Delilah was and what she did to him, because she finally got him. You know, she told him, he said, you know, how can you love me and you still holding out on me? You won't even tell me the source of your strength. If you love me, you'll tell me. And so he ended up telling her about the fact that he had made this vow to God, and that he had never cut his hair, and that if his hair would be cut, he told her he would be as weak as any other man. And she shaved his head and called for the Lord of the Philistines. And this time, when they came to bind him, Samson tried to shake himself free as he had normally done. And this, when my dad preaches this, he said, you know, he would shake himself loose. He said, but this time when he shook, nothing happened. And he was talking about sometimes when we're in church, we're shaking and ain't nothing happening. We're not breaking free, because when you spend your time with people who don't mean you well, and when you're outside of the will of God, you just drain yourself of the strength of God, and you render yourself powerless against the enemy, and he can just do whatever he wants to do with you. And that's what Samson did. And they bound him, and they said, oh, we got him now. And they took him and it gouged his eyes out, and it was just terrible. And then they shackled him, and then they made fun of him. And see, that's the thing. Somebody used to say the devil will make a fool of you. Once he gets you, once he tricks you, he makes fun of you. And that's what we have to remember, that when you are a chosen vessel, when you are chosen by God, when you've been dedicated to God, the enemy is not going to be your friend. They will befriend you only to trick you, to make you look bad, so that they can make fun of you and say that there was nothing to your God to begin with, which is exactly what they did. And they had a feast, and the Philistine god was Dagon. And they started worshiping Dagon and thanking Dagon for delivering Samson into their hands. And so you got to watch it, because there are some things that God has to fix for his glory. Samson messed up big time, and he broke the vow he allowed through Delilah, broke the vow that he had made to God. So Samson had caused this, but because of this, these heathens, right, thought that they could exalt a false god, an idol god, over the one true and living God. And that was something that God couldn't let go. So then he went in and they led him into the temple where they were worshiping Dagon. And, Samson, he still had his wit about him. He said, he was blind, so they had to lead him. He said, well, just lead me a little closer to the main pillar of the building, the pillars that was holding the building up. So just lead me a little closer, just so I could lean on it, as if he was weak and he needed it. So he went and they led him there, and he began to pray to God, and he said that I want to avenge the Philistines for my two eyes. He wanted to show them. And this was a twofold. This wasn't a vengeance for Samson's two eyes, but this was also showing them that the power of the one true living God was greater than the power of some fake God that they called on named Dagon. And so it says that Samson began to lean against the pillars with all his might, and that house fell, and it killed 3,000 of them. And with this, Samson killed more Philistines in this weakened state than he had in his entire life with all of his strength. And that just blessed me. Samson's final victory. We are going to have the final victory. Look at this. He was bound, right? He was shackled, and he had his eyes. He was blind. His eyes were gouged out. He was in the weakest point of his life, and that's when God moved mightily through him, and he just got the victory. I don't know about you, but I just felt that right then and right there, because see, I consider myself to be strong. I'm kind of tough. I ain't scary. I'm not no wimp. I do what I need to do, and I handle my business. But there are times when it gets heavy, right? It gets hard, and I start to feel a little weak. But see, according to this word right here, at my weakest point, right, God is getting ready to move mightily through me on my behalf. I can turn the camera off, because I'm done right there with this final victory. You've got to know, you've got to hold on, you've got to call on the Lord. You can't let go, and you've got to know that you're going to have the victory in the end. Let them laugh. Let them persecute you. Let them challenge you. Let them taunt you all they want. But you have the victory through God. There is no power on earth that can bind you. You have the power. What is bound on earth, you bind it in heaven. What is loosed on earth, you loosed in heaven. Is loosed in heaven. And even though Samson was standing there, he was able to loose the power of God on those people in that temple, and he had the final victory. And I'm just going to stop right there. Whatever it is, whatever has you bound, whatever has you struggling, whatever has you feeling weak, just remember, through God, you have the final victory.